Division. So there's a lot of division when it comes to hobbies and what people enjoy. In the gun niche hobby world, there's plenty of division to be had. The classics go back, ages. Glock versus 1911, Smith and Wesson and Beretta. What about AR-15 versus M14, M14 and Garand? All the weird AK guys, all that crap. We all have opinions, and most of them are unfounded. However, there is a rifle that I believe is probably the most divisive, not really fan base, but just history. You either read that this is one of the worst rifles ever designed and invented and put into production, and everything about it's trash, or it's amazing, it's a tack driver, it's super reliable, and all the praise gets heaped on it. I have that rifle today. The Remington 740. Now, I actually had a bunch of footage already shot about this rifle. I had a lot of opinions about it because I went kind of down a rabbit hole with these damn guns. I shot a bunch of the footage before I even had this rifle together because I bought this as a stripped receiver, and then I went ahead and put it together from parts that I found all over the internet. And I found so many parts, in fact, that I've got basically a whole other rifle. So this has been an incredibly expensive rabbit hole to go down. But why the hell did I suddenly become interested in these guns? So me and my buddy, we were talking about rifles that were really difficult to take apart or field strip or whatever. And there's a couple of examples in the military realm. I think he was talking about the AR 7090. But I remembered from my childhood that the Remington self-loaders were notoriously hard to take apart. In fact, literally no one did. No one took these things apart. It can't be that hard to take apart, right? I figured I got older, I got experience with a bunch more guns. Obviously, you can take apart these guns, right? It can't be that bad. People just didn't know any better. So then we started looking at it, and it turns out these guns are actually pretty difficult to take apart for the average user. And then I kind of spiraled out of control and ended up basically buying two of these damn things. So now we are 3 months into a stupid project based on a silly conversation, and I now know more about these rifles than probably anyone my age should ever know about them. So for whatever reason, I actually got a bunch of subscribers, and I don't really know why. There's like over 500 people, and then whatever. I just make videos for fun. I don't care about subscriptions or subs or anything like that. But if you do want to support maybe stupid projects like rebuilding an old semi-automatic hunting rifle that no one cares about, you could buy one of my books. I actually write books as one of my hobbies, so I'll put a link in the description of the video, but I write sci-fi and fantasy. They're on Amazon. You can get them as ebooks or as in like print copies. They're not bad, I promise. And yeah, that would be probably the best way to support me. I don't just want your money for nothing. I'm going to make these videos regardless, so you might as well get something out of it. Back to the review. So right, first, what are these things, right? These are a semi-automatic rifle made by Remington, and they started making them in 1955. Now, it's very important to remember this rifle and design is from 1955. So, what else was going on in 1955? We barely got out alive in Korea. You could buy a car flipping burgers part-time in the summer. Homes were about $4,000, and we didn't have the internet, weirdly enough. So it's 1955, and I've got a bunch of cash sitting in my pocket, and I want to go buy a rifle. And I see this sitting on the shelf. It is a semi-automatic gun, pretty neat. You can fit a scope right off the bat, which was pretty unique at the time. A semi-automatic rifle that you could easily scope. I think this is about the first one you could actually ever get in the US. Do not mention the M1D or M1C. No one was getting those in 1955, especially not a civilian. It had these wonderful buckhorn sights on it. It was very sleek. It handled very well. It points very well, and it's pretty light. It's like 7.5 pounds. So this thing was a hit. They sold the hell out of these things. They sold for a pretty decent amount of money. So in today's money, this thing would have cost about $1,800 in like the configuration you see here. The nicer checkered walnut versions that just look better, but they're the exact same internally, those cost you like $3,600. So these were expensive rifles for sure. They recoiled well. These things are an absolute kitten to shoot. They felt good. They looked good. There's no rattle to them whatsoever. These are very solid guns. Okay. So when you pick it up, it's actually pretty impressive. However, there was an issue because this is 1955 when this thing came out. There was a couple of issues with this gun, and I will get into a lot of them, but they eventually replaced it in a couple of years with the 742, which is like an upgraded model. That got retired around the 70s, and then like the early 80s they came out with the 7400, which is again more upgrades. Also, they kind of made it a little bit cheaper. If you read online, these things have a horrible reputation. Reliability, accuracy, all that stuff. Then you read the other side of the post and everybody thinks they're amazing. But let's go back to let's say it's 1960, and you became the new owner of one of these guns. Back in like 1950s, soft point hunting ammunition was pretty expensive. Like, we're talking in today's dollars, it's like $100 a box. They didn't have Privy Partisan and S&B just pumping out cheap Serbian soft points for us to use. No, they were buying Remington and Winchester, etc., and that crap was costly. Maybe you didn't want to shoot a whole box of that fancy soft point ammunition before you went on a hunt. Fair enough. But what the 50s, 60s, and 70s had that we don't have today is readily available, cheap M2 surplus. So these rifles got a pretty steady diet of surplus ammunition, which, if you know anything about the surplus 30-06, it's all corrosive. That means that the primers leave a salt residue inside the barrel that attracts water. Water plus iron equals rust. So, not to mention that, but the bolt on these things, as you can see, is pretty complicated geometry. A lot of places where you can get some salt and primer compounds that will eventually lead to rust. Now, this wouldn't be a problem if you could actually take this gun apart and actually clean it pretty easily. However, here's my other 742-ish thing. So, the problem with actually taking these apart is in order to actually get the bolts out of these things, you needed to pull the barrel off because the bolt comes out the front. Real quick, just go over the actual operation of the firearm. It is a rotating bolt, gas operated rifle, pretty similar to a bunch of different rifles that are out there. The bolt, interrupted thread pattern. So it's actually a pretty decent bolt design. This is a very strong and compact way to make a bolt. Your bolt carrier sits on this action bar assembly. Action bar assembly fits onto the rifle. You have a place for your guide rod and spring. I don't have it really assembled right now. The gas comes out here. It is a 90-degree turn into a nozzle. That nozzle feeds gas into a blind hole here. That blind hole, there's just nothing there. The gas just kind of pushes against it, pushes your action bar backwards, moving your bolt with it, and cycles the gun. One thing to note about these rifles, so Remington had the 740, the 742, the 7400, and the 750, as well as I believe the Model 4. They all use different bolts and carriers and charging handles. Now, if you read on the internet, a lot of people will say, you can just switch these charging handles out. That's not true because these bolts have two cam paths. One is for your standard cam pin, which just kind of sits in there. The other is where your actual charging handle goes. Your charging handle actually works as your other cam bolt. So you can actually tell if you pull the charging handle on these things, it's got wear marks in the cam path. Acts as your secondary cam pin. So these are essential for the operation of the gun. If you notice as well, this gas port is very far from the barrel. Most other guns, your AKM, which has a gas port right here, that much barrel length. AR-15 gas port right there. Again, pretty similar barrel lengths afterwards. Having such a long barrel after the gas block means that you're going to have a lot of gas being pushed into it to the dwell time of the barrel, or the bullet in the barrel. And this port size is drilled actually larger than the M1 Garand port size. And talking about Remington quality, I just noticed this. That broke. So, whoops. Maybe this is why people don't like these guns. Whatever. Most people do not take the barrels off of their rifles ever, right? And nowadays, where we live in a modern age of information where you can get that information of how to actually pull these things, they still don't do it. So most people do not ever take the barrel off of their gun, and these literally required you to take the barrel off to get the bolt out. So a lot of these guns were shot, and then they didn't really figure out how to get everything off of it. So they eventually just, sprayed some oil in it, maybe, and then put it away. When they actually got the gun out to go shoot it again, maybe sighted in for deer season, the entire action was completely stuck shut because everything had rusted. In fact, if you read about these rifles, you read about people having rust issues all the time. Now, this could be because they were used in wet environments, like hunting, close quarters, dragging through brush, whatever, and then never really cleaned. It's also possible that these things were shot with a bunch of surplus M2 ammunition and then just kind of put away and they never thought about that again. Either way, the surplus ammunition mixed with a gun that was very difficult to take apart meant that a lot of these things just completely rusted away in somebody's closet. Issue number 2 with these guns. 30-06 ammunition got really, really hot. Now, 30-06 is a very large cartridge volume wise, so you can fit a lot of powder in there. And manufacturers were thinking, hold on, I can load 30-06 way hotter and it can be on par with a bunch of newer modern cartridges or whatever. Basically, our powders got better and how we manufactured them got better. Our powders got better and more efficient, which led to people basically just loading super hot, factory loads. 30-06, the M2 spec is like 150 grain bullet at 2,700 feet per second out of a barrel about this long. You can get stuff that's over 3,000 feet per second in the same weight range of bullet. That's crazy fast, right? What this means to with these guns, the gas port was designed for a very specific load. It was generally designed for the 30-06 that was available at the time, which was your M2 spec. And if you notice, there's not a lot of over travel with this gun. Very little over travel, big gas port, and large dwell time with the bullet meant that your bolt is going back really fast, especially if you use heavier modern 30-06, which, if you just bought hunting ammunition off of the shelf, that's what you were getting. You were getting very hot 30-06 relative to what this gun was designed for in the 1950s. What that led to was these guns absolutely beating themselves to pieces. You had galling in the receiver, you had issues with the bolt carrier breaking, you had all sorts of issues. If you shot surplus ammunition, which it was gassed for, you had to really be careful about cleaning these guns, and they were a pain in the butt to take apart and actually clean. If you shot commercial 30-06, which got hotter and hotter and hotter as the years progressed, you were going to beat these things apart because the gas port was just drilled too wide for it. All of these things really led to a reputation of these guns being jam-o-matics, or my favorite word for them, where they were no better than tomato steaks. As in, I would use this, stick it in the ground, and my tomatoes would grow on it. That's the most amazing baby boomer diss for a rifle that I've ever heard, and we should probably bring it back. So while a lot of people have issues with these guns, it's important to look at them kind of in a historical context, because there's a couple of activities that no longer exist that this gun would be really good at, including hunting deer with dogs. I remember both my grandfather and my father saying how much fun it is to actually hunt deer with dogs, have the dogs run up on the deer, they come out in front of you, you pull your gun out, and you start firing at them. Sounds like a blast, but we can't do that anymore. However, if it was in the 1960s and I was looking for a gun that would be really good at shooting deer on the run, this is a really big contender for that. So I have the complete owner's manual from the 1950s of this rifle, and it goes into crazy detail about everything, taking the magazines completely apart, how the actual bolt works and operates. I mean, it gets down to the nitty gritty, which is really cool. And nowhere in that entire manual does it talk about lubrication. Cleaning the gun was always very important. You read in all these manuals all across the world, you got to clean your rifle, and that is important, especially when you're shooting surplus ammunition like back in the day, or just cleaning in general. I'm not saying cleaning is bad, but for a mechanical system, what's more important than cleaning? lubrication, because these are metal on metal parts, and metal on metal parts need lubrication to operate correctly. We know this from all sorts of other platforms. The AR-15 is a fantastic platform, and a lot of people say, you got to keep this thing lubed. We found this out in the GWAT era. So if lubrication was so important, why was it not talked about in this manual? And I think it really comes down to cleaning was thought to be the more important step. A little bit of lube, whatever, is fine. But these things, like most mechanical objects, like to run pretty lubed. You need to put lube on the action rails, you need it on the bolts. And if you have that, it runs great. If you don't, it doesn't run that well. It's not in the manual to lube it. So my thought is, back in the day, people would maybe wipe it down a little bit on the outside, put a bore brush through it, and that's about it. If this thing got dry on lube, just like any mechanical object, it's going to not run well. However, let's go to the source of objective truth when it comes to this firearm, because I'm just one guy. This rifle was made way before I was born. Let's go talk to somebody who really knows what they're talking about. Let's go to early internet gun forums. You generally find posts like this. He's never owned a 740, but can't say he's ever seen two of 740s. I do own an early 70s vintage 742 carbine 30-06, and it's as reliable and rugged as the day is long. That's a pretty good review so far. He then goes on for a couple hundred words, basically praising it and calling the Browning a piece of crap, which is kind of fun. Very next post. So my experience with several of these friends, the opposite of this guy's. Just issue after issue after issue. Here we see the very first usage of the term jam-o-matic with him, which is really fun. The Remington 740 and 7400 series of semi-automatic hunting rifles are some of the biggest pieces of garbage ever foisted upon the American hunter. I like the term foisted. Let's forget. Oh, Marine SGT has a wonderful comment. He seems like he's getting 1.5-inch groupings at 200 yards. Not great, but for a 60-year-old rifle, it's not too bad. 1.5 inches at 200 yards, huh? That's pretty impressive. Here we have the first mention of it being a hog gun. So I've had a 1959 740 chamber in 30-06. I've been using it for decades with open sights as a close quarters down on the creek wild hog gun. That's poetic. He's only ever had it jam once. He also mentions that they're a pain in the butt to actually tear down and put back together, which is true. I have had no problems with accuracy. I shoot it with open sights out to 50 yards and always hit the 2 to 3 inch dirt clods. That is a fantastic measure of accuracy. We should do everything in minute of dirt clog. This is a wonderful post by a man wearing a cowboy hat. When I was a correctional services officer in a state prison, they were issued the 742 and 308, and blah, 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 blah. It broke a firing pin, and a bunch of them had broken firing pin issues. Sometime after I quit working there, all the 742s were replaced with Mini 14s. That's a damning statement. We have a couple of good posts here. 35 years ago, I wanted an 1187. Pops told me no. He said, "You're too lazy to take it apart and clean it." Pretty harsh words, Pops. He was right, though. I used a doubler pump. I am lazy. LOL. Thank you, Fab. This guy gets a consistent 1.5-inch groups from his 1971 308 Remington 742. Pretty impressive. He's using factory Remington 180 grain Core-Lock ammunition. Core-Lock, known for its accuracy. This poster would rather shoot a Ruger 7mm Magnum or even a 4570 handy rifle over the semi-automatic 30-06 because of the recoil. I think he might be misremembering. Here's another wonderful post from J.N. Binford. The 742 I used to have shot 1.5-inch groups with 168 grain core locks. Got tired of replacing extractors every time I turned around and got rid of it. Once again, core locks coming in clutch there. This, guys, Margot. This post actually seemed reasonable until the very end, where he states, "My rifle will shoot 1/2 minute of angle using my system. It's a dang deer rifle and nothing more, for Pete's sake." Yeah, I'd be so sad if my deer rifle shot any worse than half MOA. Okay, bud. This man, who appears to be banned, has actually picked up his rifle for $350 at Walmart Put a Nox Op Stock 3 to 28 scope on it. He's got see-through rings, so you can still use the iron sights. Very smart. He can use the crosshair at 500 yards and the bottom plex at about 850 yards. Mine seems to keep about 1.25 minutes with Walmart ammunition. Ooh, that is a good rifle. I hope you never get rid of that. And all these people spending thousands on their PRS rigs, they should probably just pick up one of these bad boys because apparently it's an 850-yard rifle all day long. Bull feathers dilly dilly to the pit of misery. Remington sucks. Take it back and get your money back. If you want an autoloader, get a BAR. This guy has some opinions, that's for sure. So is this rifle bad? Is it good but just misunderstood? No, this rifle is still kind of bad. There's plenty of things that just design wise that aren't great. However, for what it is, which is a lightweight, easy to shoot, easy to handle, very shoulderable rifle in 30-06 that you could easily mount a scope to in the 1950s, this is a pretty good rifle. I would go hunting with these dogs. Vicious. Look at them. They made concessions from a design standpoint to make it as sleek and sporting looking as possible. That's completely understood for the time. This is not a military derived gun. It is not your AK. It is not the AR platform. It is not the Garand platform. Shoots really nice. The trigger's pretty good. Points very well. I can absolutely see myself back in like the 60s, walking through the woods with some dogs, seeing a deer come up, bringing the rifle up, sending a shot or two after it, and then, drunk driving home or something. As a project, this was super fun. I actually really enjoy shooting it, crazy enough. And after I'd put it together and shot it, my opinion of these rifles went up a lot. And I started to understand what made them so attractive for the time. Yes, there's obviously better rifles. There's way better semi-automatic rifles. But this whole package put together, when it's running correctly, is pretty slick. So there you have it. A gun that is either loved or hated. It either does half MOA or you can't hit the broadside of a barn. It's either super reliable and so much better than any other rifle the American Army ever used, or it is a jam-o-matic piece of crap that can't get through a single magazine without choking. It's sleek. It's retro at this point. It is a semi-automatic deer rifle. It's probably about 3.5 MOA, best case scenario. And for that purpose, this thing's great. So I'm going to take this to the range, get an actual accuracy representation out of it, something more than just, minute of pie plate or minute of deer at 50 steps. And we're going to get back to you. My thought, it's probably going to be 3 to 4 minute of angle gun, which is perfectly acceptable for what it was made for. So anyway, until then, all we have to go off of is posts by baby boomers claiming that they're one-MOA guns. So that's all for now.